To get Visual Studio on your machine, simply visit code.visualstudio.com, just as I've done here in my browser. Visual Studio Code is a very powerful and popular code editor. It's completely free and it supports a multitude of programming languages. And as you can see here, it's also available for multiple platforms, Mac OS, Windows and Linux. One of the really great things about this editor is that it's open source and it has a very active community behind it. And that means that great features and fixes are released every month. If I scroll to the end of this page, I can see that the number of stars in GitHub, which is basically the number of people who have showed appreciation or like this editor, is quite high. So there's a lot of activity behind this editor. So once you've followed the installation instructions for your platform and you have Visual Studio Code on your machine, launch it. So on this Windows machine, I'll just click on my Visual Studio Code icon, and in a couple of seconds, Visual Studio Code will be launched. You should be presented with a similar welcome screen when you open Visual Studio Code for the first time. And so to get going here, what I'd like to do next is open a file or create a new file. And I can do that here by clicking on New File, or up in the main menu by choosing File, New File, or even using a shortcut. For now, I'll just click on New File, and I'm presented with this new file and this inside the code editor. I'll just paste some HTML in to save some time. And there's some HTML, and so far, nothing too exciting. What we have to do next is help the editor realize that this is HTML, and we do that by naming this file with the HTML extension. So I'll save the file. I'll save it off to my disk, and let me see, HTML, and I'll call this one test.html. Bingo. Once I do that, you can see that the editor has recognized this page as HTML and it's beginning to light up the content. So you can see the nice color coding of the page we get for free out of the box. Let's look at a couple more things we get with this basic support for HTML. If I move my mouse over any tag, I get more information on the symbol under the cursor. So if I roll over HTML, I get some information about that tag, and similarly for a body tag and every other tag or element on this page. And this is great when you're learning the language. If I'm inside my editing my page and I'm editing, and if I open an angle bracket, it gives me a list of possible tags I can use. And if I select a tag, for example P, and I close it with an angle bracket, the editor automatically inserts the end tag if one exists or is needed for that particular element, which is really useful too. So there's two more things I can use. Another one is if I'm in my HTML or any other code inside Visual Studio and I want to tidy it up a bit, one thing to try is Shift-Alt-F, and it will prettify or beautify the page a little bit, and that's useful. And on the Mac you can use the same command with Command K, Command F. And so that's just a couple more features that are available out of the box in Visual Studio Code for HTML editing. Of course, it's always nice to see what your HTML code looks like when the page is rendered in a browser. One way to do that is to open the file from the local folder. So if I go to my Windows Explorer and I have my file test.html, I can right click on it and say open with and choose a browser. And as I've done before, I'll choose Microsoft Edge, and there's that file rendered inside the browser. Unfortunately, there is no preview in browser function available by default in Visual Studio Code. Fear not, community to the rescue. As I mentioned earlier, there's a vibrant developer community around this product, and they fill in feature gaps when needed. Visual Studio Code has hundreds of extensions available in the Visual Studio Code marketplace. So let's find an extension to help us preview our HTML in a browser. There are many ways to get to the Visual Studio Code extensions marketplace. One way is to come up here to the View menu and select View Extensions. And a panel is opened beside the editor which will allow us to search for extensions in the marketplace. So here I'll type in the word browser, and we get a lot of different extensions related to browser listed here. I encourage you to look through some of these, look at the ratings, and figure out for yourself which extensions you'd like to install. I'll try this open in browser because I think this is one I've installed previously. Just for demo purposes, I'll install that, and as you can see, it says installing, and then reload. I have to click reload to activate this particular extension, and this only takes a couple of moments. And once it's installed, then I go back into my HTML. I can see in the extensions panel here that it says it's installed, which is great. And I believe the command to preview using this extension is Control K and then D. And as you can see, it launches my default browser and it shows me the preview of that page. If I go back to my Visual Studio Code and I change this to be VS Code and I save it and I say Control K D, there you go, it previews. So that's just an example of an extension we can use in order to preview our HTML code in a browser from Visual Studio Code. So that's it. That's a quick lap around Visual Studio Code for HTML editing, and I encourage you to explore the documentation and discover more features of Visual Studio Code. In this video, I want to show you options in Visual Studio Code for previewing HTML in a browser. By default, Visual Studio Code gives you very little help out of the box. So what does that mean? Well, take this simple page, hello.html. If I want to see it in a browser, there are no default commands in Visual Studio Code to help. Instead, I have to locate the file on my disk and use my operating system menu commands to open it in a browser, like so. So that's my first option to preview my HTML, and it may be enough for very small projects. Given that I know the format of the address to type into the browser, I can load other pages as well. So for example, if I change hello.html to images, I can load a different page. But let's go back to our original page. The limitations of this preview approach are twofold. As you saw, I have to load the page manually the first time, and when I make changes to the file, I'm going to have to remember to save the file and refresh the page in the browser. I'll show you what I mean. So if I put my file to the side and put my Visual Studio Code here, if I change my file and say hello demo, you can see the file has to be saved. So if I save my file, you notice my browser doesn't change. Instead, I have to also remember to hit refresh. So this two-step approach, and therefore this way to preview my HTML, is still pretty cumbersome. So let's improve upon the situation with the power of Visual Studio Code extensions. As you may recall, you can access the extensions through the View Extensions menu command. So here the extensions marketplace is opened up. I'll just make sure we have enough room to show this. And in the search box, I'll type browser in to have a look at some of the extensions that contain the word browser. Now, as always, I encourage you to do your own research, review ratings and reviews to determine which extensions are best for you to install. I'm just showing you examples here, and I'm not endorsing any particular extension that I'm showing in this demo. That said, in order to show the demo, I'll choose one of these first three open in browser type extensions. I've worked with this one before, open-in-browser. So I click install, and as you can see, that has installed. I need to reload my workspace in order to have that extension be activated. So let's use this extension to see how we can open the HTML page I have in front of me into a browser. This extension has two commands. One is the Control-Alt-O command, which allows you to select a browser in order to open this page in. I won't do that for now because the other way is to open your default browser, which is Control-K-D. And as you can see, that's opened a copy of Microsoft Edge because that's my default browser, and it's launched my page. If I now expand the Explorer panel in my editor, I can right-click on any HTML page, and now I have an open in default browser selection. So here I'll open the images page, just here. I'll open that just with a command inside Visual Studio. So with this extension, I remove the task of finding my file on disk and using the context menu to load it. I also don't have to remember addresses for files. So an extension like this is definitely a step forward. However, to view my changes, I still have to save my file and reload it in the browser manually. So if I type in hello demo2 and I save my file, you can see there's still no change. I have to refresh my page here. The next level of HTML preview extension you can install is one that offers a live preview. A live preview of a HTML page is when your page is actually loaded into a local web server running on your machine, and so the page is live, meaning any changes that you make to the page also show up immediately on that page in a browser. And I'll show you how you can do that right now. So first of all, let's go back to our extensions panel. And here I'm going to search for something like live preview. And let's see what comes up there. I'll just expand this a little bit. So these first few extensions look interesting here from a live preview perspective. The first one, Live Server, will actually launch a development local server and load the page into it. So I'll try that one out. I'll just click install. And as you can see, it installs pretty fast. I'll let that run. So now that that's installed, I have to reload this workspace in order to activate that extension. So now we have our new Live Server extension in place. Down below we see that there is a Live Server button called Go Live that this extension has installed. And if I click on that button, it will start a server at port 5500. I'll just close that. And over here on the browser, you can see it's actually launched that server at this particular address with my page that I have open. So what does that mean to me? Well, it means that if I was to change my HTML text again, and I haven't saved yet, so if I do File, Save, and just watch the browser on the left-hand side, as soon as I hit Save, the live server detects those changes and serves the page to me again. So that was a quick roundup of some options to make your HTML preview experience better in Visual Studio Code. In this exercise, we're going to build our first web page from scratch using Visual Studio Code. As you can see, I have Visual Studio Code open, and so the first thing we want to do is create a blank HTML page. I'll do that by choosing New File. I have a new file now, but I need to save it as a HTML file. So I'll say Save As, and I'll use the file name index.html. And now the editor is recognizing this as a HTML file. Let's see what that looks like in our browser. So the file is saved. I'll go to my local disk. I'll select the file and open with my browser. And as you can see, it's blank. So it is picking up the file from my local disk, index.html. It's just the file has no contents. I'll just leave this side by side with Visual Studio Code so we can see everything together at once. There you go. So now we're ready to add some HTML to our file. The first thing we need in our file is the DTD tag, or the document type declaration. And as you recall, what this does is it's information for the browser to tell it what version of HTML we're running. And in our case, this is HTML5 represented by the value HTML. Great. Now the next thing we need to add is the HTML element. And that takes up the rest of the file, meaning that everything else we add after this will be contained within the HTML element. We still don't have anything visible on the page, as you can see here when I refresh my browser. It's still empty because we have no content yet over here on our HTML page. So let's move on. The HTML element typically has two children. The first one is the head element, and that's typically followed by the body element. The head element contains mostly data that isn't visible to the user. Sometimes we call that metadata. However, there is one exception to this, and that is the element called title. And this is an element that has content that will be visible to the user. If I put in a title element, and inside it I add some content, my first page for example. If I save my page now and then refresh over here in the browser, you will see that that content, my first page, it shows up as the title of this page inside the browser. And that title is also used for indexing and for web browser history and so on. That's the name of the page that will show up. So that's a visible element that's inside head. Okay, let's add some content to the page body. So in between the body element, I'll just add some text. And if I save my page and refresh my browser once more, we'll see my text up here has shown up. And we can do lots more inside this body. For example, if I was to change this so that let's add another tag, use one of the HTML headings tags, and if I save my file and refresh again, you can see how that text changes its look based on the tags that enclose it. And HTML5 defines multiple heading tags. I'll try another one. There's another one, and when I save it and refresh, you can see the different sizes. So that's it. We have our first web page built from scratch. We defined a title here, which showed up here, and we also defined content in the body of our page, which shows up like this based on the various tags that we've used. Now, we have only used a tiny fraction of the HTML elements and tags that are available to you, but hopefully this shows you just how easy it is to get started. Hi there, I've shown you previously how to build this HTML page. Now, a page like this one is not very inspiring, so what I'd like to do now is dive deeper and show you how to create a richer page like this one. As you can see, it looks like a little profile page about me, and it contains richer content. So let's go back to JSBin and create this page from scratch. So here I am back in JSBin. I've opened up a new page, so let's start creating. The first thing I'll do is change the title of our page to something more meaningful. Meet Andrew, for example. If you recall, on that page I showed you, we had my name in nice big letters. And we can achieve this using the HTML heading elements in the body of my page. Now, HTML5 defines 6 heading levels, H1 to H6, with H1 being the most important heading, and it is rendered in a larger font than all others. So I'll add my name using a H1 header. Here I type in this tag H1, and I have to close my tag, and in between I'll just go ahead and write my name. And as you can see on the right hand side, my name displays in nice big letters. Before moving on, let's try to put the original page that I showed you, my little profile page, side by side with this JSBin page so we can see exactly what I'm talking about as we move along. So to do that, I'll just take this page, I'll move it over and just align it up to the side of my window. And let me see, I can make this one a lot smaller. Now the next thing to work on is adding an image to our page. We do this using the IMG or image tag. I'll just add one here. As you can see, this is a self-closing tag, meaning you don't have an end tag. Inside the image tag, we'll use some attributes to set up our image. And the first one I'm going to use is the alt attribute. Now the alt attribute specifies alternate text for the image, which is very important in 2 scenarios. If for some reason the image you define can't be loaded, the page will at least show this text. It's also used by screen reading software to help describe to those that are visually impaired what is being shown in the image. So make sure the text is descriptive. In this case, I'll just write a picture of Andrew Byrne. The next attribute to use is the SRC or source attribute. And this attribute tells the HTML page the location of the image by specifying a URL. So I'll just paste my location of my image into this source attribute, and there you go. So you see the image has appeared, but it is very big. So let's restrict the dimensions of the image using another attribute. This time we'll use the width attribute. Here I'll just specify a width for the image, and as you can see, that has restricted the width, and therefore, because of the aspect ratio, also the height of the image to this particular size. And there you have it, a picture displaying on our page. Okay, it's time to add some text to the page. Let me introduce the paragraph and break tags for that purpose. So as its name suggests, the paragraph tag delimits a paragraph on your page. Let's add a paragraph tag and type some text inside it. So here I have a paragraph tag, and I'll just inside it, I'll just copy and paste, for the sake of time, some text. As you can see, the text wraps on the page, but if I want to add an actual new line, you think I might need to just simply hit enter and start typing. So let's try to add some more text. If I go into my HTML and I hit, at the end of this line, if I hit enter or return and start typing, what you can see is that the new line wasn't recognized in the output. It's still in the same line as the previous text. It's just wrapped on this page because of the size of this window, but it's still on the same line, as you can see. So the solution to this problem is to use another paragraph element nested inside this one, or more simply, I can use the break self-closing tag as follows. So just before this particular sentence, if I just put in the break tag, it will move that to a new line, and I can have as many of those as I like inside my paragraphs and inside my text. So there's some text I've added to my profile page. We're making really good progress now, so let's look at this subheading. If you recall, I mentioned that HTML5 defines a number of default heading levels. So this time we're going to go ahead and we'll use a H2 header as follows. So just here I'll say H2, and inside it I'll add my text. Great. Now let's list my hobbies using an unordered list. I'll just go outside of this heading tag, and here I'll use the UL element using the UL tag. So that's an unordered list, and it should contain a list of, well, list items represented by the LI tag. So first one I'll add is swimming, and then I'll add another one, learning, and last but not least in this list I'll add spending time with family and friends. And that's my list, and as you can see, it's a bulleted list of items at the moment. If I want to make it an ordered list, I just change this UL tag to OL. And as you can see over in the output, it's actually changed it to an ordered list. Of course, now that this is an ordered list, I think I'll go ahead and change my priorities. So there you go. Now we have the page, and it's got this list of my hobbies ordered exactly as I have them over here in the original page. Our page is looking really good now, so the last thing to do is to add that link at the end to my Twitter page. Now you see lots of links like this in HTML pages, and when you click on one, such as this one, the browser takes you to that link's destination. In this case, it's my Twitter page. Okay, so let's go back to the HTML editing. Links, also called hyperlinks, are added to a page using the A tag. I'll start a new paragraph first and add some text. And here I'll say something like, come say hello on Twitter at. Okay, so in line with this text, I'm going to add the A tag as follows. Now, to tell the browser where to navigate to once the link is clicked, I'll define the href attribute. href equals, and I'll just add in the URL or the destination address of the page to which I want to navigate. In this case, my Twitter account. So that's the href. And then what I need to do is to add some link text, and I do that by adding my Twitter handle, in this case, between the opening and closing tags for the hyperlink. And there you go, you can see that the link has been created on the page. So that's it, we have our page replicated, looks exactly like the one that I showed you at the start, and we've introduced a lot of different HTML elements and tags. So why don't you try this out yourselves?